Welcome back to another handheld news recap. Today we've got a lot to cover, including several driver updates, including one with a game-changing feature. We've also got interesting news for the future of SteamOS and its device support. Lenovo addresses the path forward for the current Legion Go in a massive roadmap update, as well as debunks the Legion Go Lite speculation. We have a new device now on sale from Onexplayer, as well as news of an updated eGPU that's coming very soon. GPD has also announced its first AMD Strix APU device that's coming soon. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the new Anbernic RG35XX-SP, as well as a couple of accessories from Ugreen. We have lots to cover today, so let's dive into it. We'll start off with the quick news. We have a few driver updates to go over, but before we get into that, Sony just released its new PSVR 2 PC adapter, which sold out very quickly online on Best Buy, Amazon, and other retailers, which forced me to order from South Korea. I plan to wipe the dust off my PSVR 2 and do some testing on the ROG Ally X, Legion Go, and a few other devices. If you're interested in a video on that, let me know in the comments, and if you've tried it yourself, let us know how it went. Next, we now have a price and sale page for the Antec Core HS, which is a rebranded Ayaneo slide device that we've previously discussed. The price is looking very appealing and fairly competitive. For $699, you get a 32GB, 2TB device, which puts it $50 more than the 16GB 512 ROG Ally when it's not on sale. I've been fairly curious about the Ayaneo slide, so maybe once my wallet recovers from some of the other purchases I've made, I may take a look at it. If you're interested though, take a look at the video description. There is a link to the website where you could purchase it below. Now on to the driver updates. We have a new Intel driver for the Claw and Intel X1 devices, which brings new game compatibility. Driver 5971 adds support for Black Myth Wukong, Hunt Showdown 1896, as well as World of Warcraft The War Within. Aside from that, we had a fix to Force of Warships, which was experiencing some texture corruption during gameplay. Now moving over to AMD, we had two driver updates we're going to cover. The first one is the official release 24.7.1, which brings new game support for Zenless Zone Zero, as well as Kinitsugami Path of the Goddess, which brings anywhere from 12 to 16% performance increase, depending on what device you're using. The new driver added anti-lag 2 support for Dota 2 for improved responsiveness, as well as extended Hypertune support for Grey Zone Warfare, Lords of the Fallen, Robocop Rogue City, and Like a Dragon Gaiden, the Man Who Erased His Name. And lastly, there's a beta driver for AMD, which introduces AFMF2, which drastically lowers the latency introduced from AFMF. But more importantly, it's shown to be working on portrait displays, which would bring support for the Lenovo Legion Go. The caveat being that you sideload these drivers. But more importantly, it shows that there's potential for Lenovo to release it in an official driver. Further to that, other devices from Onexplayer, aokzoe, Ayaneo, and GPD will also benefit from this new driver and have access to AFMF2. So that's it for the quick news, so let's head over to our Legion Go updates. We had a massive roadmap update recently for the Legion Go, which addressed some long-standing concerns from the community feeling that the product would be abandoned. Ben Myers, who's the product manager for the USA, addressed these concerns in depth, which I'll try to summarize the main points, and the full post can be found linked in the description. In response to the abandonment concerns, Ben says that the update cadence may not be as fast as some would like, however, background work on the device has been ongoing. Lenovo's standard end-of-year service policy is between 3 to 5 years after the last device is sold, which would relate to parts availability as well as critical software updates. Parts support would extend beyond that as long as they have stock, as well as support for the device could still be accessed if you had questions for the customer support team. Ben went on to say that Lenovo is committed to the handheld category for the long term. They've taken notes on the Go launch in ways that they can improve their response to issues that arise moving forward. As well, there's been a new team put together that's called the Voice of Customers team, where they analyze data from variable sources, including Reddit. If you, however, want to give direct feedback to Lenovo, they recommend using the Contact Us button in Legion Space. It's on the pull-out menu, you just click it, type in your message. This is something that is monitored routinely. As far as these updates moving forward, they're going to be spaced out as needed, and they're likely going to have larger amount of updates on issues, kind of like this one. So Lenovo is still investigating ways to expedite the process of putting out updates. So hopefully that's something that'll be cleared up in the near future. As far as future support for the Go devices, any updates that they can bring backwards, so when a new device comes out, if they're able to put the updates, let's say as a software update, back to the Go, they will still do that, of course, bearing in mind technical limitations. He went on to discuss transparency as well, that these updates, they're not promises, they're just updates on what's being worked on. Plans can change, so something that's talked about in these updates may end up changing to be something else, so keep that in mind while you read these. And a little side note for myself is, yeah, it really is rare to get this kind of transparency and details of what's being worked on from companies. Oftentimes they'll work in silence and wait till the update is done. I'm not sure about you guys, but I'd rather know what's coming, even if it takes a while to get here. As far as feature updates and priorities, the UI became one of the highest priorities due to some limiting factors of the previous UI that was difficult to update. And although not raised as loud as some other issues, it was something that the community was requesting as well. That's why we got that new Legion Space update, that it looks totally different. Two major features that are being focused on for the next major update is FPPT and SPPT support, so you can fully control your TDP and gyro. These are still being worked on right now, but they are definitely a high priority for the next major update. To address the ongoing question of AF/MF support for the Legion Go, because it's a portrait display, this is not something that's going to be coming. This is strictly due to the hardware limitation. It's not something that they could fix with software. But later on, they do go on to address AF/MF2 and how that's looking promising. We'll touch on that right away. To address some questions that have been coming up about mouse DPI settings that's in Legion Space, this is specifically reserved for the actual mouse built in the controller, so you need to turn on FPS mode for those settings to be active. Others have asked about trackpad DPI settings, and that's something that is planned, but it's not a high priority at this point. For the SD card stuttering, this is something that's still being investigated. However, some steps have been taken with Windows and Legion Space to help address this. It was something to do with modern sleep mode, I believe. It's something that they plan to continue to investigate, but they did mention that it only seems to affect a small number of users. Next was the left trigger and left joystick interference with low dead zone settings. This is due to the Hall effect interference. A bit of a side note, this is very similar to what I found with the ROG Ally when I did the Hall effect experiment. There, when I pressed the left trigger, you would see the joystick in the center move, so the dead zone had to be turned up. This is the exact same issue, but to a much lesser extent. And I think this is largely due to the size of the magnet used on the trigger is significantly smaller than that of the ROG Ally, so you're probably going to get less interference. Anyway, back to the update. To address this, they recommend starting with taking the left joystick, set the dead zone down to 0, and then work your way up, increasing slowly the amount of dead zone until there's no more interference. The next request people had was being able to minimize Legion Space to the system tray. This is something that is still being worked on and is planned. They addressed further customization for Legion Space. This is cosmetic as well as structurally. It is an intended goal, however, it is a lower priority right now. Some have requested desktop mode for controllers, kind of like the ROG Ally, where you use the joysticks to move around and you can press the triggers to activate the mouse buttons. It's not something that they have in the Legion Go. It is planned, but it's very low priority because of the trackpads. Some users have brought up joystick directional input speed, and that seems to be more of a hardware limitation than software. Some users have been able to mitigate this a little bit by adjusting the response curve, so maybe take a look at that if you're experiencing that issue. Another request is for BIOS settings to be accessible in Legion Space. This would be like setting your VRAM, like the UMA buffer. There's no promise made that this feature will come, but it's something that is being actively discussed. Speaking of BIOS, version 35 BIOS was removed. For those that used it, it was resetting the UMA buffer size, so just a note that you may have to go back and reset that in your BIOS settings. If you never changed it, you probably won't have the issue. I did. I usually set it to 6 gigabytes. However, they do recommend setting it to auto. Next is AF/MF2 showing promise on the Legion Go and portrait displays. It's something that I guess is working right now if you sideload the 7840 drivers. So this is something that Lenovo is investigating, and they're going to talk to AMD to see if they can implement it on their official drivers. Power Savings G is gone, but it is being advocated for its return. I'll be honest, I don't know what Power G mode was, but anyway, it may be coming back. Some other ongoing items are per game profiles, a hotkey to open the right menu for those that are using keyboard and mouse, adding refresh rate and resolution to custom performance modes, changing the default screenshot folder for Legion space, and adding an Xbox button to the quick settings quick options. And lastly, for the roadmap is that there's going to be some more first-party accessories coming soon, so stay tuned. So we had a lot of information bundled together on that update. It seems that there's a lot of work to do on the go still, but nonetheless, it's still being worked on. The next bit of news from Lenovo was addressing the Legion Go Lite speculation. This is something that was circulating around quite a bit previously, and then more so recently. And it appears that Lenovo finally addressed the issue that the Legion Go Lite speculation is based off of old information, so there's very likely not going to be a Legion Go Lite. And that's all the updates that I have for Lenovo. I think we have enough updates, so we're going to move on to our ROG Ally updates. We had an interesting update show up in one of the SteamOS beta updates, which talked about support for the ROG Ally macro buttons. Obviously, seeing this sort of update in a Steam Deck exclusive OS got people excited for what might be coming to the ROG Ally. Thankfully, this is something that Valve has confirmed to be the case, so it's going to be coming to the ROG Ally. We don't know when it's coming, but having it move over officially to the ROG Ally, that's a pretty big move. It also begs the question, will this be coming to the Legion Go? Is this going to be available for other Windows handhelds like Onexplayer, Ayaneo, GPD? I see this being one of those situations where Valve really has everything to gain. If they can get people moved over to SteamOS, people are more likely to buy games off of Steam rather than its competitors. So let's see how this all shakes out. It's a very interesting time to see official support finally come here. Secondly, we had a BIOS update specifically for the Ally X, which was fixing a BitLocker issue when you plugged in an external GPU. And other people have also reported a new GPU driver that ended in 3002, although my device has not seen this, and I've checked on ASUS's website and they don't have it either. Some users have talked about some issues with the driver, so perhaps they pulled it. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating at this point. Speaking of the Ally X, there's another issue that I've seen kind of around some of the communities where there's a squeaky trigger, like specifically the left trigger. And apparently this is fairly easy to resolve. You just need to add some grease, but it's, obviously something that you shouldn't have to do, especially on such a new device. It doesn't seem to be widespread, like it's not an issue on mine, so part of me is thinking that maybe there was just a bad batch, that some of the grease was missing on the left trigger specifically. If you're experiencing this issue, you could always return it, exchange it. There's also a fix that CPPC Tech has put out, so you could take a look at that video if you'd rather not return your device. And lastly, I've got my Ally X, as I alluded to earlier. I've put out a day one guide for those that are a bit newer to handhelds to try to help them out, similar to my other day one guides. And I'm hoping to do a review, probably like a 1 month review after I've used it for a bit. So I've had it for almost a month now. So once I get a chance to wrap up my thoughts on that, I'll hopefully be able to put out a video soon. So what do you think of SteamOS coming to the Ally? Is that something that you're game for? Are you going to install it? How about that graphics driver? Did you end up encountering it? Because I can't seem to find it anywhere. And lastly, the Ally X. Are you having this trigger issue? And did you actually end up buying an Ally X? Let's talk about it in the comments. And that'll wrap it up for my ROG Ally updates. Let's head over to MSi. For the MSi Claw, the only update that I really have is the one that I covered in the quick news already for the Intel driver, so if you missed that one, jump back there to check it out. As far as the MSi Claw 2, we don't have any new updates for that, so I'll let you guys know when I learn more about that, probably sometime later this year. And that's it for MSi. Let's take a look at the Anbernic RG35XX SP, as well as a couple of accessories from Ugreen. Recently, I had the opportunity to check out Anbernic's RG35XX SP from Geekbuying. Special thanks to Geekbuying for sending out the device for me to test. Although retro handhelds aren't the main focus of the channel, I do like to check them out when I get a chance. I am an avid video game collector and I have all of the old consoles from the main brands. If the name didn't already give it away, the inspiration has come from the Game Boy Advance SP, which looks very similar, just with a couple of button changes. Probably some of the main things to look at is how the buttons actually feel, and I do really like the D-pad. You can roll it around fairly well. It actually rolls around better than the original SP, which in my opinion, the D-pad feels a little bit shallow, a little bit flat. And then checking out the face buttons, they're very similar to the SP, they feel quite clicky and they feel satisfying to press. And if you close the devices and take a look at the buttons at the top, you can see that the buttons look and feel pretty much the same as the Game Boy Advance SP, although you do get 2 additional buttons for further device compatibility. In place of Nintendo's connectors, you get 2 USB-C ports at the back. If you take a look at the front, you have a cartridge slot on the SP, and this is where your micro SD cards go. And then on the left side, you have your volume buttons. On the right side, your power and reset. And if you take a look at the Game Boy Advance SP, same thing, volume on the left, power on the right. The devices are fairly similar, except for the Anbernic is a little bit thicker. Now we'll take a look at the games, how they play, and a couple of things that you may want to consider before buying this device. If you're playing on NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, or even Nintendo DS, you're probably not going to have a bad experience. The button interface lines up very well. Where you may run into some issues is Nintendo 64 games, PS1 games, PSP, or even Dreamcast games. In some situations like Grand Theft Auto, you can simply go to the menu, go over to the control tab, and then you can adjust the settings to have the directional input as your D-pad. In situations where you can do that, it works perfectly fine, but some situations you can't, such as God of War Chains of Olympus for PSP. Unfortunately, in this game, there's no way to toggle it, so you're left without any directional controls in this game. There are probably ways to adjust this with emulator settings or maybe even installing a new OS onto the device, but that's not how I am reviewing it today. I'm reviewing it as you purchase it. Aside from controller compatibility, the device seems to handle most games that are on it very well, with the odd exception now and then where I found Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3 was not working at all. It was running at like 2 FPS. I will say though that is not the majority of the experience. Almost every game runs well, but just keep in mind that compatibility isn't 100%. Personally, I prefer some of other Anbernic's devices with joysticks, but that's a personal preference. The SP is a pretty nice device. I will say though, I do prefer the 35XXH because I do like those horizontal handhelds. You get 2 joysticks and they just feel better in my hand. If you're interested in checking out this device, I'll drop a link for the Geekbuying buying page. They sometimes have discounts. If I have any discounts, I'll put it in the video description. And I may have a coupon code for you guys. Once again, thank you to Geekbuying for letting me have a chance to quickly test out this device and share it from a perspective of someone that's just picking up the device and jumping in. I also have 2 new Ugreen power banks to show you guys. We have 12,000 and 20,000 milliamp hours. There's LCDs to see how much charge you have remaining as well as how much you're outputting. For I/O, we have USB-A and USB-C on the smaller one. The smaller one is capable of 100 watt. On the larger, we have USB-A and 2 USB-Cs, one of which again is up to 100 watts. On the side, we have the power button. This also wakes the display if you want to take a look at how much battery is remaining. I didn't get a chance to try this for both power banks, but I tried the larger one and I was able to charge the Ally X from completely dead to 64% on the power bank's charge. This was charging while the device was on and the brightness is maxed out on the display, so it could be better if you just had it plugged in while it was powered down, but then I wouldn't be able to capture how much the percentage was at. Seeing how the Ally X has an 80 watt hour battery, this is not too bad. So if you're interested in either of these power banks, check out the video description for the link where to purchase. Thank you to Ugreen for sending these out for me to test for you guys. For Steam Deck, there's a few things to cover. The first one is some software updates. The second one related to that is that the ROG Ally is apparently getting SteamOS. And lastly, we're going to take a look at our rear cover for the Steam Deck OLED from Handheld DIY. So on August 7th, we had a major update to the SteamOS beta channel, which they called the Mega Fixer, which has a ton of improvements. There was a large number of fixes that I'm not going to cover right now, but I'll leave a link to the full changelog in the description. But really the major update on August 7th is the ROG Ally keys being supported, and that suggested that the ROG Ally was going to get SteamOS, which got a lot of people excited, obviously. SteamOS is probably one of the most supported systems that we have, where it's constantly getting updates. If I did these weekly, I would be doing, usually 2 or 3 updates per week that I'd be covering. So to see that go to the ROG Ally is going to be quite exciting. Aside from the large update on August 7th, we had 2 more, one on the 13th and one on the 14th. So on the 13th, we had one that fixed a few other issues. The first of which was for Steam family accounts, adults can now right-click on games in their library and allow kids or disallow kids to be able to use them. There was also a rare bug that was fixed that would sometimes result in the Steam Deck not being able to boot due to invalid sim links. There was a few fixes to game recording, adding support for disabling game recording on a per game basis. They fixed an issue that would sometimes crash the Steam client. There was also an issue where the jump 10 seconds forward or backwards buttons would get stuck. So now that's been addressed. As well, there's some reduced latency on Steam input. On the 14th, we had some fixes to Bluetooth. Some third-party controllers were causing session crashes, as well as another issue where peripherals would disconnect, as well as a couple of fixes to the display. There was one where you would disconnect it from an external display and the internal display would remain blank. And the second one where selected refresh rates were not applying. And next we're going to take a look at a new rear shell by Handheld DIY. It's a nice translucent shell that comes in a few different colors. You can get purple, black, or clear. Purple is currently unavailable right now. It comes with a pry tool, screwdriver, as well as some thermal pads to help with some heat dissipation. The install is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to cover it today, but if you do buy one of these and install, remember to take out your SD card. We've lost too many of those to Steam Deck backshells. So I'm just going to skip ahead and show you what it looks like on the device. And after my magic trick, here it is. It looks pretty nice. You can see through, but it's kind of subtle, which I like. I don't like it when it's too obvious. It has a nice smooth finish and seems to fit pretty well on here. Overall, I think it looks pretty good. The rear cover also comes with a little kickstand. I had to take mine off because I use the Deckmate attachment so I can attach different things like battery packs. But you can see right here on the back, there's a spot that it screws onto. You screw it on from the inside, so it's something that you'd want to do before you take it off. And you want to confirm whether your case can support having it attached. I do like the clear backplate, so I'll probably keep this on my device. I tend to get accessories that I test out often, so I end up changing backplates like I do clothes. But for now, I think this is the one I'm going to keep on it. If you're interested in this accessory, check out their Indiegogo page. I'll leave it down below in the video description. A special thanks to Handheld DIY, who provided the prototype for me to test out for you guys. And that's it for my Steam Deck updates. Let's head over to aokzoe and Onexplayer. For aokzoe and Onexplayer, I don't have any updates on the aokzoe end, but I do have a couple for Onexplayer. The first update is a new device from Onexplayer called the M1, which is a mini PC that takes the same form factor as the One X GPU. Onexplayer sent me a review unit to check out. It's a loaner device that I need to send back when I'm done, but I'm going to try to get some testing done to see how it performs. There's a few different SKUs you can get, but to summarize, it has the Intel 185H, so I'm kind of curious how that compares with the 155H that I have in my X1. So I'm going to do some testing and let you guys know how it stacks up. If you're looking to purchase one, you could buy it from Onexplayer's website, so check that out. I'll drop the link in the description. Next, we recently had announced the One X GPU 2, which succeeds the previous One X GPU that was out a few months ago. This next generation eGPU has the AMD 7800M XT, which is a little bit more powerful than the 7600. I'm not sure by how much, but I'd be looking forward to testing that. The device has a higher TDP as well as is a little bit larger than the previous version. We're expecting the campaign likely to come sometime in September, so stay tuned for that. I'll let you guys know when I hear more. And lastly, I finally have an 8840 device that I purchased. I got the new version of the One X Fly, so I'm hoping to get to do some testing versus the 7840U and some other devices in the future. And that'll wrap it up for Onexplayer. Let's take a look at our updates from Ayaneo. For Ayaneo, the update is short and sweet. We have the campaign for the Ayaneo Pocket Evo that's now gone live on Indiegogo. For those that don't remember, that's the Ayaneo 2 looking device that is actually running Android. It's got some slight changes. It's a little bit thinner and the joysticks are offset a little bit. And it's running a fairly powerful Android chip. It's probably the most powerful one you can get for a handheld right now. So check out Ayaneo's Indiegogo if you're in the market for one of those. I'll drop the link in the description. That's it for Ayaneo, so one more update from GPD. And for my last section with GPD, I have one update, and that's for a new device called the Pocket 4 from GPD that's going to be using the new Strix APU. This device isn't really a gaming handheld because it doesn't have a controller, but I wanted to highlight it because it signals that they're likely going to start introducing this chip into their devices. So I'll be watching GPD a little bit closer, and maybe we'll get a Win 5 with the Strix APU. And that's all that I have to cover for this recap. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.